nature. It sounds like just like Crystal went through some situations that she wasn't necessarily all that happy with in terms of the way that the relationships went. Sounds like you went through a couple of those as well, but you use those as a positive way. You use those as a positive way to encourage others. So we know that particularly in the fashion industry, and you were an actual model in the New York area, that whole industry could probably lead to all kinds of drama in terms of trying to find that special person and trying to have solid advice and solid relationships. So I imagine anybody that's in any of those lines in New York, it's probably like a minefield.
It is. It certainly is, especially in New York City.
So what is some of the solid advice that you have given to folks? That's one of the things I was curious about, because I know when I read the blog, you really give some solid just like common sense advice. When I was looking at the advice that you would give people, I was like, that's just basic common sense. That's just amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. I really am a big, I don't know if it's my French Colombian roots or whatever, but I do believe in this world that we live in where there's now there's gender fluidity. But I think you just have to really figure out what role, what woman you would like to show up in the relationship. If you're a lady that would like to be respected for her talents and being the big, slaying your the day and being a CEO of a company or a corporation, you may not be the best match for a gentleman who's of a masculine nature, who's the same way as you, because you're going to clash. So there's a lot of egos, and you have to have, one person that leads and one person that follows. So if you're that kind of lady that is a boss lady and running companies and you feel like you're just really in control, you may want to attract a man that is a bit more, a style that is not so masculine, and a style that's more of a man that likes to respect women, and a man that is, in a sense, more in touch with his feminine side as well. And there's a lot of men that are very, especially in New York, where there's lots of testosterone, especially in Wall Street, lots of hedge fund guys. And I think those men are best suited to be with ladies that are a little bit more feminine behavior, where they're happy to follow, but not in a way that it's not really a following like, we're back in 1950s, but it's more of they want to be cherished, and they respect the man, and the man cherishes them. And I think once you have this kind of role gender dynamic, then there is some kind of, whatever the strengths of that person is, you can make up, as opposed to always clashing egos, clashing all sorts of things that are completely unnecessary, because a lot of men, there's some men out there that are very confused of gender roles. So I believe you got to figure out what kind of woman you are, who you are, what speaks to you, and attract that kind of man. Otherwise, you're going to be, a woman who wants to be cherished, and you're going out with a Peter Pan who wants you to be a sugar mama. Who knows? There's so many different dynamics, but I always believe in having one even in home, some like situations where the people are the same gender, there's always like one person who's masculine, the other person is a little more feminine. And that seems to me to work, as opposed to in the past, I've had to really be in a situation when I first arrived in New York where I had to really struggle. I lived with six girls and models in Soho. It was a nightmare. And was getting up at 4 or 5 in the morning, going to castings, up and down the subway, up and down the city. And I really became a pretty abrasive, no-nonsense kind of girl. And when I was out dating, that kind of behavior was not working for me. When I stopped and I would visit with my mom, she was obviously very feminine, then I thought, well, maybe I think I'm going to go back to those roots. And that seemed to attract the men that was my style, like more masculine. And that's when I kind of got the hang of it, because otherwise you are really, it's like a battle that doesn't end, because you're never feeling as a woman, especially if you're feminine that the man is actually cherishing you. He's treating you like a guy, So it just depends. Each woman, there's no cookie cutter. But this seems to be working. It's worked for me, and it's worked for some ladies. I'm not saying that we have to be all in like Jackie O or like, like this kind of style. My point is that one has to be the feminine in the relationship, and one has to be the masculine.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Now, for both you and Crystal, how did y'all get involved in the entrepreneurial thing? And this is for both of you, because we'll start with you, Ingrid, because you are definitely an entrepreneur. You have this wonderful blog, Ingrid Madison Avenue, where you give this kind of advice. You also give some great travel advice, and that's one of the other questions I was going to ask you is what some of your favorite places to travel are, because you literally, both because of the modeling and just because of your work in general, are definitely a world traveler. So I was just wondering, how did the whole entrepreneurial thing go, and how did it start for you? And I'll start with you first, Ingrid, and then come to Crystal.
Well, my last project was with Peter Beard. He's the top photographer. His photographs go for like $500,000 to millions of dollars. And I started to wind down my contract. So I've always worked for myself in modeling. I've always had some kind of side hustle to make money. In New York, you can't survive unless you have that entrepreneurial spirit, or you're in a certain field like a corporate job. And I was a creative, and I've always had this burning desire to always have these lists everywhere. I would have lists of therapist appointments. I would have lists of favorite places I would go visit, restaurants, nightlife, hair salons, just everything. So every time people would ask me, like, hey, I'm going to Mykonos and Greece. Hey, can you give me your list? Or, by the way, I had this situation happen. I'm like, oh, I think I had a therapy session about this dating experience, a relationship. So I figured when I was on a trip to Silicon Valley, I was seeing a lot of the people reading blogs, and I thought, this could be something. And that's how it just happened, because of the sharing of these lists that I would keep forever, whether it's a book or in my iPad, and then kind of being in that space of creativeness. And I thought, well, I might as well start something. And thus far, it's been a fantastic journey. I'm really I'm happy that I'm allowed this part of the internet, this outlet, in order to be sharing this knowledge, especially the knowledge that of events and things that have happened to me, so other women don't have to experience the same pitfalls that I did.
Yeah, that's one of the things I really enjoy about your blog, is you definitely don't hide any of those pitfalls, and you share some of the things that you went through that unfortunately are still very common in the industry, because, with the Me Too movement, we're always hearing about those kind of like celebrities that have taken advantage of the women that are in the industry as well, and you've even talked about being involved in some kind of those same situations without naming any names, but you sound like you had gone through some of those same types of things that have brought people like Cosby and others down.
Yes, but it's random. It happens to any woman randomly, and there's nothing to be ashamed of it. And I think some women suppress these feelings, and then later on it manifests in different ways of their life. So I'm really happy that at least there's awareness of it for women to heal.
Yeah, that healing part is very important. Crystal, if you're still there, tell us a little bit about how the entrepreneurship has shaped your life as well, because like I said, you are definitely an entrepreneur, and I'm sure you can relate to even some of what Ingrid was talking about. I'm sure that all four of you probably can relate to the fact of how important therapy can be, and I know that a lot of times that's something that none of us want to talk about in our community. It seems to be that whether it's rural North Carolina like you are in, Trey, or whether it's what these three sisters are, a lot of times we try to hide the fact that therapy is very necessary and something that we probably all need to go through. But I was just wondering, Chris, if you could talk about entrepreneurship and also a little bit about whether you went through any of that kind of therapy stuff and how it helped you get through some of your situations.
Oh, I'm definitely an advocate for therapy. And like you said, it's not something that's talked about. As you read my story, one of the things that happened to me was being a witness to a murder. And for years, I never addressed that. I went to the military, went through law school, And I finally said, I'm going to get therapy for dealing with that. My grandmother would always just be like, we don't do therapy. We just pray. And I had to tell her, prayer is not enough. I need somebody else to talk to and really work through it. So I'm definitely an advocate for getting the help that you need. For me, as far as the entrepreneurship, jumping in from law school right into my job, it took me taking the bar exam 4 times to pass it. So my side hustle has always been my law practice. And like Ingrid said, Buffalo's nowhere near as expensive as New York City, but in order to survive and to pay back those student loans from getting 2 law degrees, I had to have a side hustle in order to be able to do that. And something that is not based on just the salary, but based on the hustle that I put into it. So entrepreneurship has been a phenomenal vehicle for me. And in fact, knowing that I had this, a salary and benefits over here, but if I made this much, that's what that formula and really putting the work in is what helped me get my son through college to finish.
Yeah. And Kelli, you're not that far off from her son's age, and if I remember correctly, you're in the New York area as well. And how is it trying to be an entrepreneur? Because you got a podcast, and I imagine you're also just trying to have day-to-day survival.
I think it's hard. You definitely have to find that balance of you're doing the day-to-day grind, and sometimes you feel stuck. Maybe that might be a younger thing. I'm only 30, so. But sometimes I definitely feel stuck, or maybe I'm not advancing as quickly as my peers or anything like that. So, it's definitely necessary, I think, here to definitely have that creative outlet or to have a side hustle so that way, you're working towards something and you're not just going through the day-to-day doldrums of life.
And this is actually for all of you, Crystal and Ingrid, and even you, Kelli, and to some degree, Trey as well. But I was just wondering, it seems to me that this new generation, like you said, Kelli, you're only 30 now, but it seems to me that this new generation has finally got it in their mind something that a generation that was before us, meaning the generation before mine, and I'll be 57 in July. But there seems to be a whole lot of people that are understanding, and I imagine, Crystal, your sons are this way, that they don't necessarily want a job, because the job is basically just that. It's a job. They're trying to figure out careers. They're trying to figure out something that they want to be in to make money and to make a difference, but that will be something that they can rest their hat on, that is kind of more of what I consider more like a career versus just going to the job. Because I know for a long time there were many generations that was just job to job, and then they get to be around 60 or 70, don't have that many cash in the bank, and are sitting there going like, okay, I'm trying to live to be 90, 100 or whatever, but I've got to have money to survive, and I didn't really save that much. So I know a lot of people that are in that kind of situation.
Well, yeah, my son, I talked to him a lot about working and getting. I got the mindset instilled in him that you have to do what you have to do so you could do what you want to do. So he, while he was in school, he worked a job, but for him, the 30, the hourly with the benefits, that wasn't going to be for him. So for him, he's big into physical therapy. He wants to be an entrepreneur, and he's going on for his doctorate in physical therapy. So for him, he wants to be able to work for himself, to have that that flexibility and to work for himself. And I think I see his friends and his counterparts, it's much more pervasive in his generation and in Kelli's than I think it was in even mine or before, because it was just, find a job and have that stability and that structure.
And Ingrid, I imagine it was that way even in the modeling industry, because like I said, when I think of people that have been like you are, I mean, you were on those fashion runways throughout the world, Paris, New York, and all of that, but we oftentimes think about those people having a certain lifespan. I mean, the career starts when you're like, 16, 17, maybe even 14.
I started at 12.
If you're lucky, you started at 12, and it runs until like you're into your if you're lucky, into your 30s. You don't see that many that are like the Beverly Johnsons and some of those that are the imams that are like their 40s and their 50s and they're still doing the model at that age. So I'm thinking that there's got to be that cutoff age, and then y'all start having to think about other ways to make money off of the fashion industry other than just doing the runway. And I'm not knocking the runway. It's a very important part of the fashion industry.
Absolutely, like Heidi Klum and Tyra Banks. I actually was lucky, very extremely fortunate enough to have worked until my 40s. So I'm 46.